وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to welcome you all to our final lecture of our 3-lecture series on the fiqh of fasting. The fiqh of fasting. We've been able to cover a lot of ground the past 2 weeks, and I think it's always important when we're dealing with a topic that is very heavy that we take some time, we go back and we review, because a lot of you are going to be dealt with questions, whether it be from friends, colleagues, family members. And as we mentioned, this knowledge is obligatory. It is fard ayn, it is compulsory for every Muslim. You knowing this is not only a benefit to you, but it also serves as a benefit to others. Especially when we teach, we need to really understand the virtue of teaching, because teaching an individual does not only give you a blessing in this life, but that blessing extends into your akhirah. So when you are long gone and there are still individuals who are benefiting from that knowledge that you were able to share with them while you are in your grave, then certainly that is from the greatest investments that you can make. So why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِذَا مَاتَ الْإِنسَانِ انْقَطَعَ عَنْهُ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ. When a person passes away, his deeds or her deeds, they cease, they're done, except for 3. And then he goes on to mention these 3 very special deeds, where he says, صَدَقَ جَارِيَةٌ, which is an ongoing charity, or عِلْمٍ يُنْتَفَعُ بِهِ, knowledge that is benefited from, or a righteous child, أو وَلَدٍ صَالِحٍ يَدْعُو لَهُ, or a righteous child who makes dua for them. So when we talk about beneficial knowledge, this is the knowledge that we are talking about. And this knowledge can follow us to our graves by the way that we share it and teach it to others. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from both you and I. Now, last week was a very heavy week in terms of what we covered, and we mainly focused on the topic of, does anybody remember? Go ahead.
The things that like nullify your Ramadan.
No. No. Now, those who are exempted, this is what we're doing today. Those who are exempted from fasting. Those who are exempted from fasting. Often the question is, do I have to fast? Or does she need to fast? Does he need to, do we need to fast? This is a question that's commonly asked during Ramadan. So we need to understand this. And we spoke about the different categories. The first category we spoke about was the sick individual, somebody who is ill. And we said that sickness or illness is broken down into 2 categories. The first category is a temporary, and the second category is a long-term illness, a chronic illness. And we separated the 2 because the 2 have different rulings. The hukum, as well as the kafara, the fidya, the expiation are different. So for a short-term sickness, we said that essentially, if you are ill, and by fasting it will increase that illness, or it will prolong its recovery, then that is the measuring stick that you use to determine as to whether or not you should fast. So now you are ill, you recognize that it's going to affect you, so then you say to yourself, I'm going to break my fast. What is the kafara? The Prophet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا, He's talking about a specific type of marad, and that is a temporary type of marad. How do we know this? We know this because the expiation is فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. So we know it's a temporary. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. So now we're talking about a different category of people. And from these people are those who are ill, those who are sick, and they have a chronic illness. So they have diabetes, and they need to take their medication, or they need to take their insulin. We have individuals who have heart conditions. We have individuals who are post-surgery. We have individuals even of old age. We will get into it. So we have to understand that these people cannot take the same ruling because they will never be able to fast. Medically, right? They are not labeled as individuals who are healthy enough to, or who are able, physically capable of fasting. So what is their fidya? What is their kafara? They have to feed. They have to feed, and we spoke about feeding, and we came to the conclusion that the best way to measure that in the area that we are is to provide a basic meal. And that meal should be in accordance to what you would eat for your own self or for your family. Because we gave the principle, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. If you wouldn't eat it, or it wouldn't be sufficient enough for you, then certainly another person won't eat it, and it won't be sufficient enough for them. And also we take into consideration your financial status. Your financial status. If you yourself are on the lower end of your finances, it's going to be difficult, right? So the Sharia will take into consideration your ability to provide. And we said in the books of fiqh, the kafara or the fidya is 1 mud of wheat. And what is 1 mud? This is 1 mud, a handful of wheat. Now if we went and we purchased a handful of wheat, it sure wouldn't cost us more than $5, right? So we fulfill that obligation. But we're not going to go to somebody and give them some wheat and say, have a great iftar, right? Especially here in our city. Alhamdulillah, here at the masjid, we have the Helping Hands program where we offer iftar 2 days a week to the less fortunate individuals within our community. And we have great volunteers who come, they pick up the iftar, and they go and they deliver. And you look at the meal, sometimes I come in here and I'm like, mashallah, this is very, very nice, right? Because this is part of ihsan. This is part of ihsan, and it is also the spirit of Ramadan. Because certainly the spirit of Ramadan, incorporated within it, is the spirit of generosity. All right? So that's the difference between somebody who is temporarily ill and somebody who has a chronic illness. The temporary, you make it up, and that is fine before the next Ramadan. And the chronic illness is that you feed an individual for the days that you do not fast. And we said, when do I make this? This donation or this payment, or I present this food? We said it can be done in the beginning of Ramadan, it can be done midway through Ramadan, or it can be done towards the end of Ramadan. And many of the scholars, they say the best thing to do is to actually pay it daily. Because when you pay it ahead of time, the issue with that is that you're paying for something that is not necessarily incumbent upon you. Yani, if you're paying for the 3rd day of Ramadan, and we're in the 2nd day, and you have yet to break your fast on that day, there is no kafara that is required of you. So they say the best way to do it, the ideal way to do it, is every day, but obviously that could be difficult. So to do it in the beginning, to do it in the middle, or to do it in the end before Ramadan ends, those are your options, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And one more thing that I do want to mention regarding the fidya and the kafara is the fact that the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. Right? So there's an attribute given to the person who is receiving this specific type of sadaqah. Right? And that is a person who is poor, a person who is needy, a person who is less fortunate. And we need to stress this because sometimes people will say, I will have 3 or 4 iftars at my house, and I will invite 5 to 10 people, and that will cover my expiation or my kafara. No, those are your friends. Those are your families. Those are not people who fall under the category of miskeen. So we need to be very careful. So again, we have programs like the Helping Hands. You can go to our website, inshallah ta'ala, and you can go to the donate button and you can choose from there, iftar or, breaking iftar or Helping Hands iftar for Ramadan. And inshallah ta'ala, you will be rewarded for that accordingly. And then we said the traveler. Now, does anybody remember the two qualifications or the two things that qualify a person for being a traveler? Jameel?
He wants to be 80 kilometers away from the city.
Good. So he's very precise in his answer. He says it. He says, you have to be traveling 80 kilometers. He didn't stop there. But he said, from where? From the city limits. Not from your home, but from the city limits. Does anybody know the second? Go ahead, Tamim.
If by standards you're considered a traveler?
By standards. Can you elaborate, please?
Like, let's say, for example, you're traveling, then you're going to stay somewhere for a couple minutes.
Good. So from the standards of society is what you're saying. So he says, maybe we're traveling, but we're not traveling to an area that is necessarily over 80 kilometers. Because something we need to understand, there's no hadith or there's no verse in the Quran that is going to give us an exact calculation. Now, how do we come up with 80 kilometers? We come up with 80 kilometers because when we study the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, when we look at different narrations of the Prophet ﷺ's life and when he traveled, the scholars will look at the places in which it is reported that the Prophet ﷺ would break his fast or combined his prayer. So they would find the location and then they would look at Medina and they would calculate the distance from Medina to the area in which the Prophet ﷺ did that, and then they would derive that number. But there's no exact number. So when the scholars, they use the customs of society or the urf as a measuring stick to determine you as a traveler, that does make sense. So say I'm traveling to a town or to a city or to a village that is not necessarily 80 kilometers, maybe it's 60 kilometers. But on that trip, I took time off work, I packed my bags, I let the people know I would be out of town. Sometimes my phone will even say roaming, or whatever the situation may be. That customarily would be regarded as what? Travel. Even though you are not outside of the city by what? 80 kilometers. So we can take the urf, the customs of society, and we can take the actual distance, which is 80 kilometers. Some narrations also mention 83 kilometers. When can I break my fast? We spoke about this. This is very important. When can I break my fast? If I'm traveling, when do I break my fast? The moment I wake up, I say, oh, I'm traveling tomorrow. So I wake up and I go and I, eat a bowl of cereal. My wife says, what are you doing? I say, well, I'm traveling today. I'm a traveler. What do we say in that regard? Go ahead. Yep.
You have to start your day off as if you're still fasting, and then once you get out of the 80 kilometer limit for the city, because you're considered.
Good. We're going to tweak that just a little bit. So he says that when you wake up, you have to start your day as a sa'im. You have to be fasting. Because the rukhsa or the concession has not been given to you yet. You're still considered muqim. You're still considered a resident, which means you wake up, you're fasting, right? You do whatever you need to do. You get in the car, you make your way to the airport, you're still fasting, right? You're waiting in the terminal, you're still fasting. You get on the plane, you're still fasting. The plane takes off, you're still fasting. When did I say you would be? Everyone, go ahead.
When they say the fasten your seatbelt.
So when the seatbelt sign comes on, then that's a good measuring stick as to you saying, okay, I'm out of the city. Because by the time the seatbelt sign comes off, you've been flying for well over 15 minutes. And the time where you break your fast, you said after 80 kilometers. That's not necessarily the full answer. The scholars, they say, once you have exited the town and there are no more homes or communities around you. So let's say, for example, you were leaving Calgary and you're asking, when would I break my fast? And say you're going west. By the time you pass, I would say, Callaway Park, for all you young ones, okay? By the time you pass Callaway Park, because there still are communities in that area, Springbank still has their communities. You can look to your left and you can look to your right. There's still homes there. But once you pass Callaway Park and you're heading towards Cochrane, that is a good distance for you to be considered at that moment a traveler. Because your intention isn't that place exactly, you're continuing with your travels. But you would be considered a traveler because you are no longer within the city parameters or the city limits. Okay? Second question, how long, and this is where a lot of people came up to me after the halaqah last week and they said to me, yeah, you know what, I messed up on that. How long am I allowed to break my fast? How long am I allowed to break my fast? Let's get some in the back over there. 4 days. So she says 4 days. She is following the Hanbali madhab. The Hanbali madhab will say 4 days and nights. The Shafi'i madhab will say 4 days and 4 nights, including adding the day of departure and the day of return. So, which is essentially how many days? No, so 6 in total. The Hanafis, they will extend that to about 15 days. So they will say up to 15 days. Some scholars will even take it to the point or the extent where they will say you can break your fast until you actually cement your return date. So if you travel they'll say if you travel on a one-way ticket and you absolutely have no idea where you are when you are returning, then you can continue to break your fast until that is established. Okay? Until that is established. One thing that I do want to mention here is this though. If we say 4 days, it doesn't mean that I'm going to Edmonton for a week. Once I get into Edmonton, I break my fast Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday I start my fast. No, if I know prior to entering into Edmonton, prior to my travels that I will be there for a week, I can break my fast in my travels from here to Edmonton because that is fine. But once I arrive in Edmonton, I should continue to fast, right? I should continue to fast even though that fast, it doesn't count. And the next day I need to fast because I'm considered muqim. I'm considered a resident. I'm considered a resident. But if I know I'm going to Edmonton for 3 days, I can break my fast traveling on Monday. I can break my fast when? Tuesday. I can break my fast Wednesday, and I can come back on when? Thursday. Right? I can do that because I know that my time there is less than what? 4 days. Okay? One other thing that I needed to mention, we obviously didn't have time, is this does not concern a person who is constantly traveling. Now, what does that mean? It means sometimes you go to a country, you travel to the country, and then you travel within the country. So you stay in one place for 2 days, then you travel 100 kilometers to another town or village for another 2 days. You're not situated in one spot, so those 4 days don't count. So every time you travel, you can consider those days. Does that make sense, inshallah ta'ala? Right? Because you're not remaining stagnant. You're not remaining placed, in one specific location. You're constantly what? Moving, and you're constantly traveling. This is a question we often receive from truck drivers in our community. There are a lot of truck drivers, heavy haul trucks, that brothers who drive within our community, and this is generally the hukm that we will provide to them, inshallah ta'ala. What is the ruling of somebody who does not fast because of travel? What is the ruling? What is the expiation? Go ahead. They make it up. They make it up. فَمَنْ كَانُوا مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ على سفر فعدة من أيام أخرى. And they need to make it up before the next what? Ramadan. Very good. Okay. We spoke about old age. So old age, you understand what your physical ability is. Your doctor is advising you, due to your old age, it is not recommended that you fast. So you don't fast. What is the kafara? What is the expiation for old age? I mean? No, speak up.
Each day you miss, you feed one poor person.
You feed?
Miskin.
One miskin. Very good. Because why? Why doesn't he fast?
Because
The doctor said, huh? You got the doctor's note, huh? Because he can't. Because he can't. Right? لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Very good. And then we said children. So any child under the age of puberty, and we said puberty is unique to every individual. It is not a set age. However, there was an age that we said the Sharia categorizes a person as mature, even if they haven't gone through puberty. What is that age? Go ahead. 15 lunar years, which is equivalent to what? Go ahead. 14 and a half. These guys are, guys, by the way, these are like 10, 11-year-olds just giving you fiqh verdicts like this. Come on, ya shabab, ya jama'ah, come on. These are 10, 11-year-olds. Oh, sorry, he's 13. La ilaha illallah, my bad, bro. He's 13, mashallah. Alhamdulillah. I'm proud. I'm very proud, mashallah. طيب. Let us continue. Menstruating woman, we spoke about that. I'm not going to get into detail in that right now because we're going to be talking about that even more in detail. And finally was the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding woman. What did we say concerning the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding woman? We said the scholars, they do not differentiate between breastfeeding or pregnancy as a concession to break your fast. There's no issue. If you are a woman and you are pregnant or you are breastfeeding, you should not feel bad that you break your fast, and you should not question the validity of you breaking your fast. There is no difference of opinion amongst us. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he considers, we'll get to actually the position of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh in this. But where do the scholars, they differ? They differ as to what is the expiation for a woman who breaks? And this is probably the most common question asked during Ramadan. So I've had a few brothers actually reach out to me needing to answer this question for their wives. And all I did was I went to the halaqah last week and I said, listen, from minute 52 all the way until the end of the halaqah. But we said that if a woman fears for her own self and her ability to fast because she's afraid of hydration, lack of hydration or lack of nutrition, she breaks her fast. And she's considered somebody who is what? Sick. So all she has to do is make it up. But if a woman fears for her fetus or her child, fetus because she's pregnant, child because she's breastfeeding, then we say, now the scholars, they differ. The scholars, they differ. We said the Shafi'is and the Hanabila, they what? They say that if she fears for herself, she makes it up. She fears for the child, she makes it up, and she pays for each day. The Malikiyya, the Hanafis will recommend it. They say it's recommended to pay, to make it up, and to pay. It's recommended, but it's not mandatory. The Malikiyya, they will distinguish between what? Breastfeeding and pregnant. If she's pregnant, then all she needs to do is make it up. If she's breastfeeding, then she makes it up and she gives what? Fidya. She gives fidya. Okay? So those are the rulings according to the 4 schools of thought. Now you know them. Now it's your choice and it's your discretion to choose according to what you believe is best for you and according to the school of thought that you follow or the imam that you follow.
However, we mentioned Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Umar's position that if a woman is frequently what? Pregnant, then what? So frequently we mean like, okay, one year she's pregnant, 9 months, and then 2 years of breastfeeding, and while she's breastfeeding, she's pregnant again, which is another 9 months, and then another 2 years of breastfeeding, and while she was in her second child breastfeeding, then she gets pregnant again with the third, that's another 9 months, and then another 2 years, that's a total of 9 years, which is equivalent to 270 days. 270 days is just shy of a full year. You ask a woman to fast for a full year, that is mashaqqa. That is difficult. Some of the women are just like, no way, right? So Ibn Abbas radiallahu an, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, they say in this situation, it is sufficient to what? To what, sisters? To pay. It is sufficient to pay. And that's where we left off. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we will be talking about the nullifiers of fasting. Things that break your fast. How many times do you hear somebody say, brother, stop listening to music, you just broke your fast. Sister, stop backbiting, you just broke your fast. Stop swearing, this is a big one. Stop swearing, you just broke your fast. Right? Are these actually nullifiers of fasting? Did I break my fast when I swore? Or when I was backbiting? Or when I was listening to music? Is that what happened? So we need to understand as Muslims, how do we protect our fast? How do we as Muslims protect our fast? Now, I want to give a heads up here, especially to the parents. A lot of the stuff that we will be talking about tonight is for a mature audience, right? I didn't say for an older audience. I said for a mature audience. I know 10-year-olds who are more mature than 20-year-olds. Okay? So let's make that distinction. But what we are talking about is for a mature audience. Okay? So I'm hoping I don't get an email or a phone call after the halaqah. My child was there and they were listening to what you were saying. Right? I just cover the kids' ears or take them to the back. People need to know this. La haya fid deen. There's no shyness when it comes to learning our deen. We need to learn these things. Okay? So I've already given you the what? I've given you the the heads up on this one. Okay, there's the disclaimer. It's been presented. All right. So this point right here is going to require very close attention. This point that I'm going to make right now is going to require a little bit of concentration, inshallah. So let's go ahead, inshallah. So the nullifiers of fasting. Okay. In principle, so this is a principle that I'm giving you. I'm giving you a principle. And whenever you're questioning as to whether or not you broke your fast, use this principle. Okay? So in principle, the things that break your fast are the same 3 things that are found in the definition of fasting. Where we said the definition of fasting is the worship of Allah with the intention of refraining from food, drink, and major intimacy from the adhan of Fajr to the adhan of Maghrib. What are the 3 things that we mentioned in the definition? What are the 3 nullifiers? Food, drink, and major intimacy. Understand these 3 things. Now here's the principle. Anything that resembles food or consuming food, drink, or major intimacy, anything that resembles it in way or effect. Anything that resembles it in way or effect. Now what does that mean? Now I was like, well, I don't understand what that means. Let me explain what that means. IV glucose. You know what an IV is? IV glucose. Or an IV drip. You know what an IV drip is? Like a vitamin C drip. Sometimes you have these pop-up pharmacies. You feel a cold coming on. It's an IV drip. They'll put you in vitamin C straight through your body. You feel better immediately. Subhanallah. Do IV glucose IV or vitamin drips, do they break my fast? Okay, you say yes. How? Why? In what way? Huh?
It's like an effect. The effect when you eat is that you like.
The effect. The effect is nutrition. Is it whey? It's not whey because nobody eats what? Like this. Nobody. It's not. It doesn't break your fast by whey, but it breaks your fast by what? Effect. Okay. What about istinshaq? I'm making wudu and I suck it in through my nose and I do it purposely because I know that this is all connected. We've got some weirdos out here. You see them in the bath. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Does that break your fast?
Yes.
Why does it break your fast? Huh? Go ahead.
Whey and
Whey? Look at that brother, thank you for the bottle of water. Not by whey, akhi. Allah yadik.
well, there's the effect that
Effect.
going down.
What's the effect? No, the effect is what?
Going down.
Quenching your thirst. The effect is what? Quenching your thirst. Okay, what about if I'm chewing on a pen? And then a little piece comes in and oh, I swallowed it. It's just a pen though. It's just plastic. I swallowed plastic. Did I break my fast? Okay, we'll get to that. Very good. He's like, intention. Yes, very good, brother. MashaAllah alayk. You're absolutely right. We'll get to that. But I'm just saying, you're just careless. You did it purposely. Kids sitting there just eating dirt. Or you're sitting there eating paper. Sometimes kids in class, I teach at school, so you see the craziest things. You're just chewing on paper. Like, what are you eating? He's like, nothing. And he swallows it. He doesn't want to tell you he's chewing on paper. Huh? Does he break his fast?
Yeah.
He breaks his. What is the calories of a spitball? Does anybody know? He breaks his fast. By what? By whey. Okay. So this is the principle here, guys. Anything that resembles food or drink or major intimacy by way or effect will nullify your fast. Will nullify your fast. What if I say, for example, putting on oil on my body? Will that nullify my fast? You don't think so? Yes. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. No. What about smoking or vaping? By way. By way. By way, right? Because it's entering through your mouth into your body. Okay? Very good. Somebody ask a question? Oil? No, I was just playing around. Oil, you can oil it up. No problem, inshallah. All right, let's go. Let's start, inshallah. Nullifiers of fasting. So do we understand the principle? Yeah. Let's leave the principle alone. Carry that principle with you. Okay? Carry that principle with you. Now let's go to what the Quran, the Ahadith, and the scholars have agreed upon, inshallah ta'ala. Intentionally eating or drinking. And the word here is what? Intentionally. Now, there's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he said regarding the person who has eaten or they have drank something during Ramadan out of forgetfulness, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? فَلْيُتِمَّ صَوْمَهُ فَإِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاهُ. So let's say you're a kid at school and you have gym class and you're running and you still have energy, and then you go to the water fountain, you're not really thinking, you just drink. Right? And that's happened to a lot of kids. And then they say, oh, I broke my fast, so they break their fast for the rest of the day. No. That is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for indeed Allah has given that to you. So you continue with your fast without the need of what? Making it up, because it was done unintentionally. Now, there's a difference between breaking your fast mistakenly, and breaking your fast out of forgetfulness. Does anybody know the difference? So, forgetfulness is the situation that I just gave you. You're running, you're in the gym, you go to the water fountain, or you're at home, maybe you're tidying up, you go to the water, you go to the tap and you drink and oh my God, I'm fast. That's what we call forgetfulness, right? That is one way that you can make a mistake, right? And then there's when you make a mistake. Now what is a mistake? A mistake, for example, is if you're doing istinshaq and you sniff the water so much that it comes down your throat. Now, that wasn't done out of forgetfulness, but it was done out of what? Mistake. And both of those situations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not hold you accountable if you are sincere. Is that understood? So there's times where we make mistakes, and there are times where we forget. But if they are done unintentionally, then we take the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, فَلْيُتِمَّ صَوْمَهُ فَإِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاهُ. Is that understood?
Yeah.
Very good. So what happens if I break or I eat intentionally? So I eat intentionally. I break my fast. I did it intentionally. I said, you know what, I don't care, I can't handle this anymore. Sometimes a person will lose their temper and they'll just drink. I broke my fast intentionally. Now they lost that day. However, they need to continue to fast for the remaining day, and they need to make tawbah because they committed a major sin. They committed a major sin. To break your fast intentionally is a major sin. Okay? Another way we can break our fast is by breaking our intention. This is a big one. If you nullify your intention, for example, you get upset, I'm not fasting anymore, I don't care. You broke your fast. Even though you didn't eat, even though you didn't drink, even though you didn't fornicate or have a major intimacy, you broke your fast. Why? Because the evidence is, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. Just as we spoke about intention the first class, just as your intention establishes your fast, it can also nullify your fast. Even if you do not what? Drink or eat or commit major intimacy. Okay, moving on, number 2, intercourse. Okay, quickly.
For the intention, what about like sleeping all day, for example, or just giving up?
Yeah, so the scholars will say that the fast, sleeping all day, this is what the scholars, they say specifically. Sleeping all day does not nullify the fast. However, it is a major sin, not because of the fast, but because of the prayer. Is that understood? Go ahead.
What about brushing teeth?
We'll get to that inshallah. I'll just give you the answer. Brushing teeth is fine as long as you are, number one, very conscious of the amount of toothpaste that you are using. Try not to use too much, and try to be very careful and make sure that you're spitting all of that residue out. Okay? But generally speaking, the brushing of the teeth or using the siwak is not a nullifier of fasting. However, one should be what? conscious and cautious of how they are brushing their teeth. Okay? All right. So intercourse. Now intercourse will nullify your fast. Now what does intercourse mean here? It doesn't necessarily imply seminal emission. It doesn't imply seminal emission. But what the Sharia regards intercourse as is the touching of the two private parts. Just touching. If they touch, then the fast is considered what? Void. And intercourse, it actually takes a different ruling. And the kafara for breaking your fast due to intercourse is different than the other types of kafara for the other nullifiers. Whereas if a man and a woman, they do have intercourse or marital relations, major intimacy, while fasting, then they have broken their fast and they need to fast شهرين متتابعين, 2 months consistently. One after the other. This is the kafara for it. There once was a man, this is a beautiful story. There once was a man, this is reported by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. There was a man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm doomed. He says, what's wrong? He says, Ya Rasulullah, my wife and I, we were fasting, but we had marital relations. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said to him, can you free a slave? He said, Ya Rasulullah, I cannot free a slave. He said, okay. He said, can you fast 60 days? He said, Ya Rasulullah, I can barely fast 1 day. Then he said, okay, can you feed 60 people? He says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm very poor, I can't feed 60 people. Rasulullah is looking at the guy like, come on man, I'm giving you 1 shot, I'm giving you 2 shots, I'm giving you 3 shots. Okay, let me do something for you, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So what does he do? He leaves. And then he comes back, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And with him is a platter of dates. And he says, take these dates and go distribute them to the poor and the needy of Medina. So the man, he takes the dates and he holds the dates and he looks at the dates, then he looks at the Prophet ﷺ and he says, Ya Rasulullah, wallahi there is nobody who is more needy and poor than me in Medina. Prophet ﷺ is like, oh my God man, just take him and get out of here man. Just go. Yeah, just go. There's nothing more I can do for you. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. We learn a lot from this hadith. Number one, we learn the mercy and the leadership of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number two, we learn that major intimacy nullifies a fast. Number three, we learn the what? The kafara of it. So number one is freeing a slave. If we cannot do that, then we move to fasting 60 days. And if we cannot do that for some reason, a legitimate reason, I know brothers who have done it, then we move to feeding 60 people or feeding someone 60 times. Okay? Feeding 60 people or feeding one person 60 times. Miskeen. All right? Very good. This leads us to the topic of intimacy. Like, let's say, we're not talking about major intimacy, we're talking about minor intimacy. Holding hands, hugging, kissing. We can even get into any type of intimacy. Ya shabab. Any type of intimacy other than major intimacy. Now, the scholars, they differ when it comes to the permissibility of being intimate with your wife during the month of Ramadan. So some of the scholars will say it is actually haram. It should not be done. And they will use the verses of the Quran. فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Right? Now, meaning the evening, now you can. فَالْآنَ. فَالْآنَ means now you can. Meaning before you cannot. But now, فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. It's okay. But before that, it's not okay. Some of them will say it is makruh, like the Malikiyah, they'll say it's makruh. It's not haram, but it's makruh. And the reason they say it's makruh and it's disliked is because it will lead to major intimacy. Right? It will lead to major intimacy, so it's disliked. Some will actually say it's mustahab. Yeah, he says, He's like, what? So you have, some will say it's haram, some will say it's makruh, and you will have some like the Zahiriyah, they will say it's actually mustahab. And they say, why is it mustahab? Because there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He goes and he kisses Aisha radiallahu anha, and she says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm fasting. And the Prophet ﷺ, mashallah alayhi, Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik alayhi, he says, me too. He says, me too. See, that's the beauty of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Me too, I'm fasting too. So what does that mean? If the Prophet sallallahu fasts, is fasting, and he kisses his wife, and in another narration, the Prophet sallallahu well, that's actually more so for wudu, so we'll leave that alone. But he says, me too, meaning this is not what? Nullifying my fast. The majority, the Jamhur, will actually say this. It depends on who it is. So the majority of scholars will say it is permissible and it is not permissible. There once was a man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Rasulullah, essentially he's saying, he asked the Prophet ﷺ if it was permissible for him to be intimate with his wife, less than major intimacy. The Prophet ﷺ said yes. Another man came, asked the same question. The Prophet ﷺ said no. How did they reconcile between the two? They said the first man was an older man. The first man was an older man who could control his what? Desire. Whereas the second man was a younger man, and I feared that he would not be able to what? Control his desire. So the scholars, they use this and they say discretion should be taken into consideration. That if you're a newlywed, then you probably should what? Not. However, if you've been married 10, 20, 30 years, right? Sorry?
Probably bored of each other.
You'll see, young man. You'll never get bored of your true love, inshallah. I say that because my wife is here today. Inshallah. Number 3, deliberate seminal emission. Deliberate seminal emission. Do we understand what this means? No. Okay. So masturbation breaks your fast. Deliberate, I want the young brothers to pay attention to me, please, very carefully here. Yes? Listen, guys, we need to learn our deen. Okay? And if we don't learn it in the masjid, we will learn it on the streets. And you don't want it, that is not a place where we want to learn our faith. So we learn our deen in the masjid. And just as the Prophet ﷺ taught his ummah, it is our duty to take the knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ and teach our communities. Masturbation with seminal emission breaks your fast. However, it does not require the same expiation for what? Major intimacy. It will require you to make up that day as well as make istighfar and tawbah. And also require you to continue your fast that day, even though that day is not what? Counted. Now, what if a man is sleeping and he has a wet dream? What does he do in that situation? Does he continue with his fast? Yes. Because we said here, deliberate. Now, does an individual control themselves when they are sleeping? رُفِعَ الْقَلَمِ. The Prophet ﷺ said that the pen has been lifted on 3. The individual is sleeping until he wakes up. So if you are sleeping and a wet dream occurs, then you make ghusl and you continue with what? Your fast, and there is no need to what? Make up the day. Okay. What if a male and a female have their intimacy at night, and then they fall asleep and both of them are in a state of janaba? By the way, the Prophet ﷺ said, if there's intimacy at night and you cannot make ghusl, which is major ritual purification, then at least you should make what? Wudu. But you're still in a state of ritual impurity. But he says, don't go to sleep in a state where you are in a state of major ritual impurity and at least you haven't made what? Wudu. So he says, make wudu. But let's say there was marital relations, they go to sleep, they wake up, they miss suhoor, and they wake up at the adhan of Fajr in a state of janabah. Do we understand the situation? Are they allowed to fast? Yes. Yes, they are allowed to fast. Because tahara is not a condition to the validity of starting your fast. Do we understand that? Tahara is not a shart, it is not a condition to the validity of starting your fast or even continuing your fast. It's not like salah. Do we understand this? Salah, no, you cannot. You say, I made wudu. No, wudu is not enough. You need to make what? Ghusl before you perform the action, because it is a condition. But with fasting, it is not a condition. So say you wake up, you would go, you would shower, and then you would pray Salatul Fajr. And you would continue with your fast, inshallah ta'ala. We're almost done here, inshallah. The beginning, another nullifier, the beginning of a menstruation cycle or postpartum bleeding. So sisters, let's say you are fasting and Asr prayer comes in, you pray, and then you go and you relax for a bit, and then you feel something. And you are then certain, when we spoke about this principle last week when we said, Al-yaqeen la yazul bishak, didn't we? How a woman can be comfortable breaking her fast, and how a woman can be comfortable starting her fast. We use the principle, Al-yaqeen la yazul bishak. Certainty cannot be negated by doubt. Until you are certain you broke, until you are certain your menstruation cycle has begun, then you remain fasting. Until you're certain, 100%, without a shadow of a doubt. Or until you are certain that it has finished, then you refrain from fasting and praying. But here the point is this, it's Asr time, and then you are become certain that your menstruation came, you didn't eat, you didn't drink, you didn't have marital relations, but your fast is broken. You say, no, there's only 1 hour left, it's okay, I can just see it through. Your fast is broken. Breaking your fast will give you the same reward as you fasting. Because it goes back to your obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this regard. And you would have to make that day up, but you will be rewarded for the hours that you fast, but it will not go to the account of a full day served. Is that understood? So even though you were fasting and you were so close to Maghrib, the ruling is that once the menstruation cycle begins, then automatically your fast is nullified. You break your fast and you make up the day bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Finally, we will talk about intentional vomiting. To vomit intentionally, if you vomit intentionally, you have broken your fast. What's the difference between unintentional vomiting and intentional vomiting? Essentially, when it comes to unintentional vomiting, you could be dizzy, you could be nauseous, you could feel ill, and it's something that you don't want to do, something that you don't want to force, but it comes out. Intentional is essentially you entering your finger into your mouth and gagging yourself and causing yourself to what? Vomit. In that situation where you intentionally vomit, then your fast has been nullified. But if you are not feeling well and you vomit and you did it unintentionally, then you can continue that fast without the need of what? Making it up, inshallah ta'ala. However, if you vomit, you want to be very careful that you try not to what? Swallow it. You don't want to swallow it, right? Because if it's out and then it's in, then technically that breaks your fast by what? By way. Very good. By way. Not by effect, but by way. Because something outside came in and entered into the cavity. Okay? And entered into the cavity. All right. Let's take a few questions then, inshallah ta'ala. Go ahead. Sure. That's why we say do your best, inshallah. Go ahead. Then that's unintentional. Unless you're like, I want to vomit, and then you vomit. Okay? Go ahead. Shak. Al-yaqeen la yazul bil-shak. Your yaqeen, the certainty that you are fasting, is established until you are certain that you broke your fast. Do you understand? So the doubt cannot negate the certainty of you fasting. You understand? The only thing that can negate that certainty is another certainty. Okay? Inshallah. Any other questions, inshallah ta'ala? Go ahead.
What if you put water in your mouth to spit it out?
The scholars will say it is makruh, but it will not break your fast, inshallah ta'ala. Go ahead.
What if you're back to traveling? If you're for example, you're intending to move for 3 days, but then you get stuck there, does the plane break down?
Then from the next day you would continue to fast, inshallah. But if your intention was what it was, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Go ahead.
What if you're bleeding,
Sorry?
bleeding? Pretend you're gonna a cut in your hand.
Bleeding. No, bleeding does not break your fast. Bleeding from general parts of your body does not break your fast. Okay? Go ahead. Yeah, you got to be careful. But generally speaking, sometimes it's out of your capacity. It's out of your ability, right? You should be fine, inshallah ta'ala. So maybe if you know you have this problem, which a lot of people do during Ramadan, then making sure you're taking some type of medication at suhoor would be your best advice. So like Tums, or there are specific types of medication prescriptions that your doctor can give you for that type of issue. Go ahead. Mouthwash should be avoided. mouthwash should be avoided, especially mouthwash with alcohol. Mouthwash should be avoided. It should be avoided. Go ahead. I'm just going to mention this because this is something we often get. The use of inhaler. The use of an inhaler. Now, the scholars, they differ when it comes to the use of an inhaler. But many scholars will say that an individual who does use the inhaler, their fast is still valid. And one of my teachers when I was studying in Malaysia, he was doing his PhD in nullifiers of fasting, contemporary nullifiers of fasting. And from those things and what we would do is he would give these halaqat in Arabic. He didn't speak English. Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Kindi, may Allah bless him and his family. But he would give his halaqah in Arabic, and I was fortunate enough to translate for him while he was speaking. And one of the days we spoke about, he gave us the research on the actual the inhaler, and he was of the opinion of the position that it doesn't. And one of the arguments was that, number one, it goes to through the respiratory tract and not the gastric tract. And number two, he said the amount of content that actually would reach that area would be no more significant than the amount of water that would reach there after you make istinshaq. Is that understood? So he said because that amount is not, the volume of that amount is not more or would not be more than the amount of the natural water that would reach, your throat and then down into your gastric area, then it would what? It would not nullify your fast. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Go ahead. No. Well, no. Hugging your wife will not break your fast. That is the answer to your question. Hugging your wife does not break your fast. Go ahead. One question.
Okay.
Everybody's questions.
Does pills, if you take pills but without water, does it still break?
Yes, it does. Go ahead. Okay, so insulin. Insulin doesn't necessarily, any type, I'll give you the principle. Injections, any type of injection that you take that does not provide any nutritional value does not nullify your fast. Okay? So any type of injection that does not provide you nutritional value does not break your fast. Vaccines do not break your fast. Blood sampling or blood exams also will not break your fast. They will not break your fast. Go ahead. Are we talking about glucose? It's salt. Is your daughter? It is. I will talk to you right after the. I will come specifically to you, inshallah ta'ala. Yeah, that was something, inshallah ta'ala. I'll come to you right after, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Go ahead.
The ideal time for the exam, in the calendar, it's 10 minutes before the azan of the Fajr.
Good.
So have we stick to this?
So we spoke about imsak in our first class, and we said that imsak generally is a precautionary measure. In the Sharia, there is no mention of imsak. So when we speak about the actual time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. Now, that certainty comes not at the time of imsak, but it comes at the time of the adhan of Fajr. So say you woke up, say imsak is 4:50 and the adhan is 5 a.m. Say you woke up at 4:55, you have every right to eat and drink until the adhan of Fajr. You're welcome. Go ahead.
She asked a dentist appointment in Ramadan and you're fasting. Does that nullify your wudu?
So she asks about having a dentist appointment during Ramadan. So generally speaking, the scholars will say regarding the dentist is that going to the dentist in principle does not nullify your fast. However, you need to be very careful that you do not swallow. Now, I was just at the dentist 2 days ago because I want to get all my work done before Ramadan. And if I tried to refrain from the water going in, I really had no control. That's number one. So this is why the scholars, they say, it is preferred to delay that appointment. However, if, for example, you have a very severe toothache that is causing you great pain and you need to take care of it, then you can, inshallah ta'ala, you can go to the dentist and be cautious and maybe even let your dentist know as well that you are fasting.
Does the same ruling go to a doctor's appointment too?
No, doctor's appointment, there's no problem with going to a doctor's appointment. The reason we say dentist specifically is because there's a lot of water and a lot of different things that are coming in and out of your mouth. Okay? Okay, go ahead. We're going to take 3 more questions, inshallah. Go ahead. Receiving blood? Yeah, no. That will nullify your fast. Yeah, because there is that value there. The platelets and all of that, the red blood cells and all of that will actually give you a form of nutrition. So that will nullify your fast. Go ahead. EpiPen, no. Go ahead. Any more questions on the sister side? One more question, inshallah. Go ahead.
So, if it's like in Ramadan and like somebody like threatened you and you have to break your fast with them.
If it's Ramadan and
Like,
somebody what?
threatened you.
Threatens you? You knock the guy out. They don't threaten me. You don't threaten me. I'm fasting, whether you like it or not. Yeah? It's like, take this. No. You defend yourself and you defend your deen, Habibi. Nobody should threaten you. You live in Canada, alhamdulillah. Freedom of religion. Okay, last one, just because you're amazing. It decreases your ajr with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is a very, very despicable act. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't like it. He actually likens it to eating the flesh of your dead brother. أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُ. Right? So we want to avoid that as it eats away at your ajr. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. This brings us to the end of our class, our halaqat for the session. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from you and I. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to reach the Ramadan healthy, strong, with faith and conviction. وجزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.